This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV
called Bigger, Higher, Faster. This program is about the bigger end of things. When it comes to military aviation anywhere in the world, fighter aircraft are perhaps the most glamorous edge of aviation. But go to any air force anywhere in the world and they'll tell you one thing: the heart and soul of air forces often lie with massive transport aircraft like the Boeing C-17. We're at the joint bases Pearl Harbor, Hickam, the same Pearl Harbor that was attacked by the Japanese during the Second World War. Today this base is a very important and very large American asset, and we're going to be flying on the Boeing C-17. It's an aircraft described by some as being perhaps the most advanced strategic military airlifter anywhere in the world. And India is now in the process of getting a number of these C-17 aircraft. And the missions this aircraft performs are quite remarkable. All American efforts, whether in Afghanistan or in Iraq, are dependent on massive transports like the C-17.
Sometime in the near future, the C-17 is likely to form the basis of India's strategic airlift capability. It's a transport that redefines the word rugged. Designed to operate by day and by night in hostile war zones, the C-17 can take off, refuel in air, and land in tiny airstrips in pitch darkness. It can carry everything from paramedics and their equipment to giant main battle tanks.
You can always depend on it. The varied missions that it flies, very significant in that it can land in short fields, take off in short fields with large amounts of cargo, even semi-prepared surfaces, so you don't even need necessarily have asphalt with the C-17. It can do low-level missions with airdrop. In fact, record number of airdrops going on today in Afghanistan to support forward-based troops. Air medical evacuation, significant successes there for C-17.
Today I will be flying on the C-17 with the 535th Airlift Squadron, the Tigers, deployed with the 15th Wing of the U.S. Pacific Air Force. Our mission starts early from the Hickam Air Base. We won't be back till late at night.
Major Paul Anderson, Aircraft Commander of Lava 51. This is the formation brief, the Lava 51 flight 3 ship this evening. new aircraft commanders. Captain Ma will be allotted 5-2 aircraft commander, and Captain Vizon will be allotted 5-3 aircraft commander. Lieutenant Colonel Winstead's the mission commander for the overall flight this evening. For participating units, we've got 535th members attached, OG, OSS, Wing PA, and then our guests with us as well from the New Delhi Television. Overview of tonight's mission objectives are to give a good representation of what we do in the C-17 and airdrop and air lands for our guests, as well as give currency and proficiency for all of us and do it in a safe and efficient manner this evening. Sequence of events will be taking off, going out and doing 5 passes over Cairns DZ up to formation and refueling, and then down into John Rogers for some NVG, ALZ work, and then back to Hickman at the end of the evening.
As we move to the tarmac, it's time to load the jet, also known as the Globemaster.
Alright, so it's time now for our flight on the C-17. Lots of different scenarios that we're going to be looking at. Should be an exciting flight. Let's see what this plane is all about.
A minute's engine startup. Clearances from air traffic control, taxi to the runway, and takeoff. We start our mission with a series of steep landing approaches to small landing strips. Landing here is not like landing your friendly commercial airliner. The approach is steep. The jet is hammered onto the tarmac. And the braking action is violent.
They're sitting down for the touch and go. I don't know if that was coming off for visual.
Or in cases like this, a touch and go. The pilot applies full power and lifts off in what's called a go-around maneuver.
For the assault landings, we do them in what they call a full flap configuration. We do come in with normally airliners, and most of the time you land, you come in on what they call a 3-degree glide slope, so fairly shallow coming in and just, coming in. Coming in a full flap landing, we can go up to 5 degrees of glide slope, so it's much steeper, but it allows us to aim for a point on the ground and allows us to hit that point more accurately.
In the gigantic cargo hold in the back, a specialist paramedic team are simulating saving the life of a soldier in distress. On our next approach, we land the jet, which shudders to a violent halt. But how do you position a jet as large as this to where you want it, on a rough airstrip in the back of beyond?
When you're doing a rough field landing, there's a lot of potential for FOD, for foreign object damage, to get sucked into the engine and cause problems within the engine. And so with the high wing design, that eliminates a lot of that and allows us to really operate the aircraft in a small, tight area with reverse thrust.
Alright folks, we're going to do 2 more of the backings, so I got y'all take your seats.
What you see here isn't footage being played in reverse. This is the C-17 actually reversing into position after landing. It's a bit like an elephant walking backwards.
My responsibility when we back the aircraft is to make sure that I have good communication with the pilot, that he constantly hears me talking. We have to brief ahead of time the signals that we're going to use and the verbal cues, like telling him which direction to turn and how to turn, and also like any obstacles that may interfere with our backing, such as if we're going uphill or downhill.
It's time now for the next part of the mission, perhaps the most complicated and tricky of the entire day. Coming in formation with the KC-135 tanker over the Pacific for a series of practice runs at air-to-air refueling. For the past 6 hours, we've been part of a major practice exercise with the US Air Force. Taking off from the Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam, we've had a chance to check out many of the capabilities of the C-17. As we head to one of the most challenging parts of the mission, air-to-air refueling, here's a quick look at just what the C-17 is all about. A 4-engine strategic and tactical transport, the C-17 is 174 feet long. It has a wingspan of more than 169 feet. Each of its 4 engines develops more than 40,000 pounds of thrust. It has a maximum payload of 77,500 kilos and has a per unit cost upwards of $191 million depending on how the jet's configured.
Let me say that having worked on several legacy Air Force aircraft myself, this aircraft is late 80s technology that has been constantly upgraded throughout the years. Their first flight was in 1991, and here we are 20 years later. And all of that time, we've continued to upgrade the aircraft. We haven't just stayed with the original design, right? It has been upgraded through a global reach improvement program, a lot of U.S. Air Force funding for R&D to make sure the aircraft is state-of-the-art 2010, 2011. So it hasn't just stood still. And certainly when you compare it to other airlift, it is the cutting edge.
Of all the skills pilots on the C-17 pick up, it's the ability to refuel mid-air, which is often the toughest. The 4-engine jet ahead of us trailing a boom is the KC-135 tanker. The boom operator, housed in the fuselage of the tanker, extends the boom to a tiny receptacle above and behind the cockpit of the C-17 I am seated in. It's only once the boom is locked in that fuel transfer can take place. It's easier said than done. For the boom to connect, the two massive jets need to close to just a few feet of each other, with the pilots making tiny control corrections. A small mistake or unexpected turbulence and the lock with the fuel boom breaks and the process restarts.
The reason you see these images in this eerie green glow is because we're recording on infrared and we're in blackout conditions on board this C-17 transport. It's not unusual for this aircraft to be operating very late at night in pitch black conditions. These are tactical conditions meant to get the aircraft in and out of hot zones. In fact, in the cockpit as well, there is this eerie green glow. And the way pilots operate in these conditions, they can actually land in tiny airstrips which you wouldn't be able to see through your naked eyes. They use night vision goggles to enable them to do just that.
A lot of what the C-17 does is at night, under the cover of darkness. And that includes landing and takeoffs like this, in pitch darkness, with the only illumination being provided by night vision equipment. Today, the US Armed Forces are close strategic partners with their Indian counterparts, and the Indian Air Force regularly exercises with the US Air Force. In fact, the Indian Air Force has deployed its own heavy transports in Hawaii in the past for joint exercises. Today, as India moves to acquire the same weapon systems, the interoperability of equipment, which has been a concern in the past, gets diminished, though India continues to acquire weaponry from a wide array of nations, with no necessary preference being given to acquiring weapons from the United States. When it does enter service, and the deal for the Indian Air Force to acquire the C-17 is in its final stages, India's transport fleet, the backbone, for example, of all operations across the Himalayas, will see a big jump in capabilities. What's more, our forces will be able to deploy quickly at extended ranges to areas around the world.